120 millimeters of rain in just 72 hours. That is not a forecast. That is already happening right now across eastern Scotland. And here is what nobody is telling you. The models have completely changed their predictions in the last 24 hours. Everything you heard yesterday about cold and snow, scratch that. We are now looking at something entirely different. And you need to know this before Friday morning. Right now, as you are listening to this, an amber rain warning is in force. Amber, not yellow. That means the risk is real, the impact is significant, and if you live in Aberdeen, Perth, or Kinross, you need to pay attention to what happens in the next 60 seconds, because I am going to tell you exactly when this gets worse. But first, let me ask you something. Have you noticed how wet it has been? How relentlessly the rain just keeps coming? There is a reason for that, and it is not just bad luck. A massive blocking pattern has set up to our north, and it is acting like a brick wall, forcing low-pressure systems to stall right over the top of us. They are not moving. They are just sitting there, dumping rain, hour after hour, day after day. And here is the twist nobody saw coming. Remember all those forecasts about cold easterly winds bringing snow and ice? The weather models were showing it day after day, run after run, temperatures dropping to -5, -8, even -10 in some areas, widespread snow potential, a proper wintry spell, the kind of weather that would have made early February feel like the middle of winter, gone, all of it, changed in 24 hours. Now, I know what you were thinking, how can the forecast change that much that quickly? And that is exactly what I am going to explain, but stay with me because at the 3-minute 20-second mark, I am going to show you the exact date when conditions shift again. And you absolutely need to know this if you have plans for the weekend or early next week. Let me paint you the picture of what is actually happening right now, this very moment across the country. Eastern Scotland is getting hammered, not just regular rain. We are talking about 60 to 80 millimeters already, with some spots on higher ground seeing 100 to 120 millimeters. A few locations could even reach 150 millimeters by the end of this week. To put that in perspective, that is more than a month's worth of rain in less than a week. The rain is turning to snow over the Grampians, snow at around 300 to 400 meters elevation, and it is starting to accumulate. This creates an added risk because snowmelt combined with ongoing rain means rivers are going to swell, drainage systems are going to struggle, and flooding becomes not just possible but likely in vulnerable areas. And those winds. Southeasterly winds are picking up strength, bringing a risk of large waves along the east coast. If you live near the coast, you know what this means. Spray, potential for coastal flooding in exposed locations, and generally miserable conditions that make even a short journey outside feel like an ordeal. But here is what is really fascinating, and this is where weather forecasting becomes almost like detective work. The blocking high pressure to our north has not disappeared. It is still there. The problem is the weather models completely overestimated its strength just by a couple of 100 miles, just by a small shift in position, and suddenly everything changes. Think about it like this. Imagine you are standing on the border between two countries. One step to the left and you are in one climate, one step to the right and you are in completely different conditions. That is essentially what is happening to the entire country right now. We are on the milder side of that boundary, the Atlantic side, instead of the bitterly cold side that the models kept showing us. The very cold air is still out there. It has not vanished. It is sitting just to our north and east, tantalizingly close. We are talking a matter of a few hundred miles. In weather terms, that is nothing, but it might as well be 1,000 miles away because it is not reaching us. Not this week, probably not early next week either. Now, here is your first reward for staying with me. I promised you would know exactly when conditions shift, and here it is. Friday morning is when the next area of low pressure arrives in the southwest. This is a wet and windy system, and it is going to bring strong winds, particularly to Cornwall and southwestern areas. Keep an eye on this if you are in these regions because wind speeds could be significant enough to cause issues. Friday afternoon sees slightly drier weather pushing in, but do not be fooled. This is not an improvement. It is just a brief respite before more unsettled conditions return. The pattern we are locked into is rain, brief dry spell, more rain. Over and over. It is like being stuck in a loop. And the temperatures? Here is where it gets interesting. Thursday, we are looking at 6 to 10 degrees Celsius. Chilly, yes, but nothing remarkable, nothing that would make you think twice about it. Friday, similar story. 7 to 9 degrees in most places, though a few spots with clearer skies might drop a bit lower, close to 4 or 5 degrees by morning. Saturday and Sunday, 8 or 9 degrees by afternoon. Then into Monday, we see colder air in the north, but again, not bitterly cold. Low single digits in Scotland, 7 to 11 degrees further south. Cold enough to be unpleasant, especially with the rain and wind, but not cold enough for snow. Not cold enough for those proper wintry conditions. And this is the frustrating part. The models were so sure, not just one model, multiple models. The GFS, the ECMWF, the ensembles, they were all showing a colder pattern for days. About 10 days ago, some runs were showing a beast from the east type pattern, bitterly cold, really strong, relentless blocking with a completely non-existent Atlantic. Then last week, it shifted to more of a battleground scenario with most runs still having the cold air winning out. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, still mostly cold on the forecasts. Then we get to today and they completely backtrack. Most runs now show a milder scenario, not mild as in warm. We are not talking double digits widely, but milder as in not cold enough for snow. This is not the first time this has happened. December 2021, anyone remember that? We thought we were going to see a very wintry spell over Christmas. The models were showing it. High pressure to our north and east, cold air flooding in. Then we got to the 21st, 22nd of December and the models completely reversed. The cold air stayed just offshore. The high pressure was not quite as strong as predicted. And we ended up with a cool, unsettled pattern instead of a white Christmas. Same thing is happening now, the exact same pattern. It is almost like a weather deja vu. But here is the question you should be asking. Why does this happen? Why do the models get it wrong, especially when they have been consistent for days? The answer is complicated, but I will make it simple. Weather forecasting at this range, 7 to 10 days out, is incredibly difficult when you have these blocking patterns. A small change in the strength of the high pressure, a small shift in position, and the entire forecast changes. The models are trying to predict the exact strength and position of a weather system more than a week in advance. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they do not. The GFS model has been the most skeptical over the past few days. It has probably been the most accurate in hindsight because it never fully bought into the cold scenario. It showed the low pressure system sinking to our south, tried to pull in an easterly, and it did show a little bit of cold air mixing in for Scotland. But it always kept the bitterly cold air well out to our east, because it never thought the block would be strong enough to pull it in. The ECMWF was more bullish on the cold. Yesterday, it was still showing cold air winning out for most of its runs over the past week, but not anymore. It has backed off. The -5 air does pull in for some areas in its latest run, but generally speaking, the Atlantic wins out. We end up on the slightly cooler side of the jet stream, not the bitterly cold side. Now, let me tell you something important, and this is where we get to the part at the 5-minute mark that I promised you. There is still a chance the models reverse again. There is a chance they flip back to showing colder weather. We are not far away from that scenario. A small change in the blocking pattern, a slight strengthening of that high pressure, and suddenly we could be back to talking about snow and ice. But, and this is a big but, the fact that they have already backtracked today means we would have to see some really significant changes in the model runs over the next 24 to 48 hours for that to happen. It is possible, but I would not bet on it. Not after what we have seen today. Let me walk you through what you can actually expect over the next week, step by step, because I know that is what you really want to know. Tonight, Wednesday night into Thursday morning, rain continues across northern parts of Scotland, snow falling at around 300 to 400 metres, slowly accumulating. Wales and central England see a drier slot spreading in, with mist and fog developing by Friday morning. Temperatures fall to around 4 or 5 degrees quite widely. Eastern Scotland feels particularly cold with those easterly winds. Thursday daytime. Miserable across northeastern Scotland, where that amber warning remains in force. That area of low pressure from the southwest pushes a band of rain northwards across the country. Showers breaking out, some bright spells possible, but the risk of heavy downpours remains. The winds could be quite strong around this low pressure, particularly across Cornwall, something to keep an eye on if you are in that area. Temperatures 6 to 10 degrees, feeling colder in the wind and rain. Friday starts wet in the southwest, that low pressure system having arrived overnight. Rain spreads northwards during the morning. More rain for eastern Scotland, adding to the already significant totals. A slightly fresher feel to the day compared to Thursday, with temperatures around 7 to 9 degrees. By Friday afternoon, a bit more dry weather develops, but it remains unsettled overall weekend. Saturday and Sunday both look unsettled, particularly across southern areas. Those easterly winds become more dominant across northern areas, bringing a colder feel to Scotland. Temperatures 8 to 9 degrees by afternoon in most places, but feeling colder in northern areas with that easterly wind. Not a washout, but certainly not pleasant either. Cloudy, damp, with outbreaks of rain moving through. Early next week. Monday and Tuesday continue the theme. Colder in the north with those easterly winds, low single digits in Scotland. 7 to 11 degrees further south, still unsettled, still blocked, with slow-moving, low-pressure systems bringing further outbreaks of rain. Now, here is what you need to understand about this pattern. The blocking is not going to help with any colder weather, but what it is going to do is slow precipitation down to a snail S pace. We could see horrible conditions similar to what we have seen this week. It could be a rinse and repeat scenario, perhaps a colder rinse and repeat as we see some chillier air mixing in, but basically the same thing falling out of the sky, just with temperatures a few degrees colder. Cold rain. That is the recipe from the latest model runs into next week. Not snow, not ice, just cold, persistent rain with strong winds at times and generally miserable conditions. But, and I want to emphasize this because it is important, not all hope is lost for those of you who enjoy winter weather. The ECMWF ensembles still show a little bit of hope. They have backtracked from a lot of the ensemble members, but there are still a considerable number that show temperatures dropping to -6 to -8 at 850 hectopascals, which is the level meteorologists look at for snow potential. Some members even show colder than that, very cold. But it is nowhere near as many as we saw yesterday or the day before. The blocking pattern is still forecast to continue into early February. So I would not be surprised if we did actually see something colder developing in early February. But for the next week into early next week, it looks like those easterlies are going to arrive in some capacity, just nothing like what was forecast even yesterday, nothing remotely close to what models showed at the start of this week or through last weekend. Let me give you some context about these ensemble members, because I know some of you are interested in the technical side. The ensembles are basically the model run multiple times with slightly different starting conditions. Think of it like running the same race 51 times with each runner starting from a slightly different position. Most of the runners end up in roughly the same place, but some end up quite far apart. The spread tells us how confident we can be in the forecast. Right now, the GFS ensembles show temperatures around -2 to -3 degrees Celsius at 850 hectopascals. They were showing -3 to -5 before, a backtrack by a couple of degrees, but it makes all the difference. Generally speaking, we are below average. Cold, but not very cold. Very few runs go down to -8, which is the threshold for widespread snow potential. Even fewer getting down to -10 to -12, which would be pretty bitterly cold. Precipitation totals remain quite high in the ensemble runs. The idea is cold, unsettled, and blocked. Slow-moving lows just sitting over us, dumping rain day after day. The blocking is not shifting them along quickly like it normally would in a typical Atlantic pattern. Instead, they stall, they linger, and they just keep producing rain. Surface temperatures in the ensembles show a drop over the coming days, down towards mid-single digits, maybe even low single digits for a time. But again, not quite cold enough to see wintry conditions widely. It is that awkward temperature range where it is too cold to be pleasant, but not cold enough for snow. Now, here is something I want you to think about. Weather patterns like this, where we see such a dramatic change in the forecast, are actually more common than you might think. It happened in December 2021, like I mentioned. It happened in late January 2023. It happened in early March 2022. The pattern is always the same. Models show cold and snow for days. Everyone gets excited. Then at the last minute, around 3 to 4 days before the event, they completely reverse course. It is frustrating. I am not going to lie to you. It is frustrating for weather enthusiasts who want to see snow. It is frustrating for forecasters who have to explain why the forecast changed so dramatically. And it is probably frustrating for you if you were hoping for something different than more rain. But here is the thing. Weather forecasting has come an incredibly long way. 30 years ago, we could barely forecast 3 days ahead with any accuracy. Now we can see these patterns developing a week or more in advance. Yes, the details change. Yes, sometimes the forecast flips entirely, but we can see the broad pattern, we can see the risks, and we can warn people accordingly. That amber warning for eastern Scotland, that is based on the forecast being quite confident about heavy rain there, even if the details about temperatures and snow further out are uncertain. That warning is solid. If you are in Aberdeen, Perth, or Kinross, take it seriously. Now, you might be wondering, what about longer term? What about late January into February? This is where it gets interesting, and this is the teaser I promised you for what comes next. The blocking pattern is forecast to persist into early February. That is still showing up consistently across the models. High pressure to our north and east, trying to force colder air our way. The question is whether it succeeds or whether we stay on this Atlantic side of the divide. Some of the longer range charts still show potential for colder conditions developing in early February. Not guaranteed, not certain by any means, but possible. The pattern supports it. We just need that high pressure to strengthen enough, to position itself correctly, to actually deliver. Think of it like this. We are at a crossroads. One path leads to continued Atlantic influence, cool and unsettled, but not particularly cold. The other path leads to blocking, strengthening, easterlies developing, and temperatures dropping. Right now, we are on the first path. But the second path is still there, still possible, particularly as we move into February. I want to be clear about something, though. I am not promising you snow. I am not promising you a cold snap. What I am telling you is that the pattern supports the possibility, and that is the best we can do at this range. Anyone who tells you with certainty what the weather will be in 2 weeks is either lying or deluded. The honest answer is we do not know yet. We can see the potential, we can see the risks, but the details will become clearer as we get closer. Here is what I suggest you do. Check the forecast every day, not just the headlines, but the details. Look at the rainfall totals if you are in eastern Scotland. Look at the wind forecasts if you are in southwestern areas. Look at the temperature trends if you are planning activities for the weekend or next week. And most importantly, comment below and tell me where you are watching from. Let me know your location because I want to give you more specific forecasts for your area. The UK is not a uniform blob. What happens in Aberdeen is completely different from what happens in Cornwall or London or Wales. Tell me where you are and I will make sure future forecasts address your specific area. Before I wrap this up, let me give you the headlines one more time, because I know some of you will have jumped ahead, and I want to make sure everyone has the key information. Amber rain warning in force for eastern Scotland. 60 to 120 millimeters of rain, potentially 150 in spots. Flooding and disruption likely. This is today, Thursday into Friday. Take it seriously. Friday sees wet and windy weather in the southwest. Strong winds possible, particularly Cornwall. Keep an eye on this. Weekend looks unsettled. Not a washout, but certainly not pleasant. Outbreaks of rain, cloudy skies, temperatures 8 to 9 degrees. Early next week continues the pattern. Cold and unsettled in the north, less cold but still unsettled in the south. The cold and snowy weather that was forecast, not happening. Models have backtracked significantly. We are looking at cold rain instead of snow and ice. Longer term into early February, still some potential for colder weather developing, but nothing certain. The blocking pattern supports it, but we have seen how quickly forecasts can change. One more thing before I finish. I know this was not the forecast some of you wanted to hear. I know some of you were hoping for snow for a proper winter spell. Trust me, I understand that feeling. But I would rather give you the honest forecast, the accurate forecast, than tell you what you want to hear and be wrong. Weather forecasting is about probabilities and possibilities, not certainties. Right now, the most probable outcome is cold, wet, and unsettled for the next week. Could that change? Yes. Will it change? We will find out over the next few days as new model runs come in. So here is what I need you to do right now. Comment below with your location. Let me know where you are watching from so I can tailor future forecasts to your area. Tell me what you are seeing outside your window right now. Is it raining? Is it windy? How does the weather feel where you are? And if you found this detailed forecast helpful, if you appreciate the honesty and the depth of information, stick around because I will be back with another update soon. The weather pattern is evolving, the models are running every 6 hours, and things can change quickly. You want to stay informed, you want to know what is really happening instead of just hearing the headlines. The next video will cover what happens beyond this unsettled spell, what the models are showing for early February, and whether we finally see that cold air break through. It is going to be fascinating to watch how this develops over the next week. Remember, the most important thing is to stay safe, stay informed, and stay flexible with your plans. If you are in an area under warning, take the warning seriously. If you have travel plans, check the forecast before you leave. If you are vulnerable to flooding, make sure you have a plan. Weather like this, persistent rain and strong winds, might not seem as dramatic as a blizzard or a heat wave, but it can be just as disruptive and just as dangerous. Flooding can happen quickly. Travel can become hazardous. Power cuts are possible in strong winds. Look after each other. Check on neighbors, especially elderly or vulnerable people. Make sure everyone has the information they need to stay safe. And keep watching this space because weather forecasting never stops, patterns never stay still, and there is always something new developing just over the horizon. Comment your location below. I will see you in the next forecast.